Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Integrative You Radio. And I I actually have had on my list to talk about trendy diets and how they are actually causing problems and causing toxic overload to the liver and the body. And then in taking requests for podcast topics, I had some people that were asking about discussing the ancestral living trend, which really goes hand in hand with this idea of a another new trendy diet. And I want to talk about this, from a high level in the perspective that this isn't just about the ancestral living trend. This is really about this constant introduction of new trend diets and how they are being marketed as the end all be all. And listen, guys, I'm going to take full accountability. I created a cookbook series called Eat for Your Condition, which was influenced by the paleo movement and the autoimmune paleo movement and how to, use diet in order to overcome diseases. And at the end of the day, yes, there is value in understanding what foods are creating inflammation and what foods are not. But I got away from it. I still have three cookbooks that I have never published and I never will. And it's not that the food isn't delicious. The food is lovely, but the foundation of what those cookbooks were built on, I don't subscribe to that belief system because I've learned, I've evolved. And I think that there is a level of mental toxicity that is coming from these trend diets because it's taking people farther and farther away from understanding any fucking thing about food and nourishing their bodies. And some of the things that I talk about today might sound really, really simple, but it's actually very difficult in places like the US because food is not fucking food anymore. We've gotten so far away from just eating food. And this is why people are overwhelmed, confused, and they're giving up before even trying. It's too hard to sustain, eating a healthy diet because of the accessibility and the influence of processed convenience foods. So, before going off on a tangent there, this idea of ancestral living. So really at the end of the day, this is talking about people growing their own food, people eating, like a hunter-gatherer, eating products that come from plants and products that come from animals. Makes logical sense that that could be beneficial. The thing is that this isn't just about knowledge of understanding what's good for you. It's about the fact that it's so easy to default back into the sad American diet because it's everywhere. I live in Italy now. You know how many times I'm like, oh my God, I want a fucking burger. I want a good burger so bad. I can't get it here. I can't I can't go and just get nachos. I can't go and just get a burger. I can't go and eat like shit. It is actually very, very difficult, virtually impossible. You go to the average restaurant here and tomato mozzarella salad, yeah, there's pasta, but like the pasta has a little bit of olive oil on it and maybe some cherry tomatoes. Maybe there's, some seafood on it. You're not getting pasta covered in ricotta cheese, covered in mozzarella, covered in tomato sauce. Eggplant parm is not breaded. Chicken parm doesn't exist. Like, you can't, it's actually really difficult to eat like complete shit. And so then people might say, oh, but, they eat so much sugar and they eat croissants in the morning and cornetto technically. They eat pastries and cannolis. And so this is really the driver that I want to point out because I've just been observing over the past year of being here. And it's honestly flipped a lot of what I have thought to be true upside down. because it's easy to just say, consumption of sugar is bad. Consumption of, too much sugar is going to be bad no matter how you want to swing it, even if it's good quality sugar. And again, this is more of an observation than doing scientific research. I just don't care to do scientific research about this right now in my life. But there are people that, well, mostly everyone starts their day with a cappuccino and some type of pastry. And so my integrative medicine brain and understanding the body and organs and blood sugar would say it doesn't matter if it's quality or not. That's a terrible way to start your day. You can't start your day with sugar, empty carbs. You need to start your day with protein. It is such a fucking bizarre concept for Italians to ever eat an egg in the morning. They're like, what? Like, no. They eating an egg, eating like bacon. They're like, they think that that is crazy. Like, that is so not happening in any Italian households, let alone at any restaurants. The only restaurants you can find that stuff are restaurants that are geared towards Americans or English, I should say. And so I was just like, okay, this culture has been doing this for generations. Like, who am I to say that I know better? Because when you walk around Italy, this is not one part, one city. There are generally no obese people. There are generally not many people, unless they're significantly old, like 80 and above. Like, you don't see people in wheelchairs. You don't see people with uh you know uh like major injuries that they're limping, they have a cane. Again, like, you're going to see this if they're very old, and you'll see this in some of the villages where a lot of people have lived there their whole lives, and there's a big population over the age of 80. But for the most part, you're not really seeing people that have, like, different disabilities, essentially. Most people are very active into their older years. They walk everywhere, and they're not overweight. It's very few and far between. And so, again, I'm like, well, you're not seeing a major epidemic of obesity here. So they clearly figured something out that other people haven't. And France is the same. France, they're getting up, same thing, espresso, cappuccino, and a pastry. Croissant, we call it cornetto here. And it's just kind of like, well, how does this make any sense? And really, what I realized is that, one, I think that there are various iterations of sugar. Something that I've noticed here, and I've actually asked some of the pasticcerias, the bakeries, I'm like, do you not use a lot of sugar in making your pastries and making, the cannolis, everything else? Or do you feel that it's the quality of the sugar? And they essentially, most of them said both, but some of them said, like, no, we use a decent amount of sugar, but things don't taste sweet here. It's a completely different taste profile than what you're getting in the US. It doesn't matter if it's organic or not in the US. Like a cannoli here, I grew up eating this stuff. I grew up with cannolis, Italian cheesecake. My grandmother had cousins with a huge bakery that still exists in New York City. And, we had that stuff in the house every single week. There was a delivery every single week. And the taste is completely different. You have a cornetto, a croissant in the morning, it is not sweet, even if it's filled with cream or filled with marmalade. So that is something that I've been finding very interesting. And it really leads me to believe that even, what we call like a natural sugar or a cane sugar or just sugar in the US is not really sugar. It's still chemically manipulated to be sweeter than what actual sugar is, like plain old cane sugar. And then don't get me started on the whole high fructose corn syrup and all of that. Because I think the biggest thing that I've taken away from being in another country is that Italians don't overthink about what they eat and they don't eat. They just eat. And part of it is what is normal, like what are the normal things that they're eating, which, yeah, it's a boatload of pasta. And yes, their pasta is a very different quality. A lot of the pasta is being made within the restaurant or within the place where you're buying it. There are literally pasta shops that solely make pasta. But even the pasta that you're buying for one euro inside of the grocery store is still significantly better quality than what you're getting in the US. But as I mentioned earlier, is that even if you're having a big bowl of pasta, you're not having pasta, then having a huge piece of protein, then having, a side dish. You're having that beautiful bowl of pasta, but just the normal way to prepare a pasta is not covering that pasta with tons of oils and fat and sauce. They're keeping most of their dishes very, very, very simple. And so I eat almost anything that I want, and I had to think about everything that went into my mouth because it was it if I wasn't eating properly, I was going to get inflamed. I was going to have a gut issue. I was going to get a headache. I was going to have swelling. I was going to feel like shit the next day. I was going to, there were all these things that I had to consider. And now, after being here and my body changing, my gut changing, my microbiome changing, it's a completely different ball game. And so the point that I'm trying to make here is that what it comes down to is, yes, eating food that you know where it came from is always going to be beneficial for you. Eating protein from a farm, eating dairy from a farm that you know that it's quality and it's not being compromised by hormone and antibiotic treatment, consuming plants is going to be beneficial. So, yes, there is truth to this idea of ancestral living. But the thing is that eating sugar, having some dessert, having those things, it's not that we shouldn't be doing any of that ever. Those are things that it's all about the context. It's about the quality and the context. It's about how you pair your food. It's about how much food you consume, and it's about how chemically manipulated was the food or the ingredients that built the food. And this is something that is extremely, extremely, extremely hard to navigate in the US. And one of the reasons, in all transparency, that I left was I was so sick of spending hundreds, thousands of dollars in a month, hundreds of dollars a week to eat food that I knew was still mediocre. I would order from this Amish farm out in Pennsylvania, and in the beginning of them being or beginning of them existing, it was very reasonable to get, raw dairy products from them and raw cheeses and everything else. And then it got to the point that a quart of goat milk was $28. And it's like, I value food and I value nourishing my family, but like, it was just fucking ridiculous. Like, this is what I have to do in order to try to be healthy. And if I felt fantastic and my gut felt fantastic and my kids' health was fantastic, if all of it was fantastic, I probably would have just said, this is what it is, and this is an expense that's just part of my life. But when I look at my health, and I'm sure that some of you guys see it when you see videos. Like, I used to have the worst bags under my eyes because my kidneys were stressed all the time. And yeah, I'm sure part of it was actual stress, emotional stress. And then part of it was constantly being exposed to toxins that my kidneys had to filter out. My gut had highs and lows. It wasn't constantly a problem, but it was never 100% normal. Bowel movements were not always normal. My son, I look at pictures of him and he had that distended belly when he was little, when we were still in the US. He doesn't have that now. His stomach is completely flat. That kid eats cornettos and cannolis and he drinks milk. Like, the other aspect of this is that we're not stressed as a family about everything we eat and everything we put in the house. Like, there's so much freedom for me around that. Like, for me to be spending so much money on food and then just be like, I know that there's still problems with what I bought was so fucking frustrating to me. It was so unbelievably frustrating because you eat every day. You eat multiple times a day. Like it's not something that we can escape. And don't beat yourself up if it is something that stresses you out. I'm not saying that you should move to Italy. It's definitely a great life. But it is something that really has to change in the US. And this is one of the reasons why people are saying, fuck it, I'm going to move into a house where I have property. I'm going to start my own garden. Like people are prioritizing this. And, and then there's a whole sector of people that are saying, like, oh my gosh, like, what are we doing? Like, there's like the conversation about trad wives, traditional wives, and, all these women that are raging about the idea of going back to more traditional ways. And listen, I can relate to that because I've been a businesswoman my whole life. But there's a reason why that's being valued because people are sick of working their fucking ass off to make money to spend it on products that are still killing them. It's like such a fucked up concept when you really, really think about it. We're literally working ourselves to death and destroying our own health because if you're going to be that busy, you're forced to eat out. You're forced to grab and go. You're forced to live on coffee to keep your energy levels up. Like you're forced to do all those things. And then you're forced to pay professionals to help you with your health when your health gets really bad because you're just burning the candle at both ends. And then you're paying your child care, you're paying other people to raise your kid, and then your kid is acting in ways that are stressing you out more. And then you don't know what to do because you just feel like a hamster on a wheel going, going, going. And then you're also spending a boatload of money on food that is still actual shit. So this is the reason why people are moving towards ancestral living. They're moving towards, more old school traditional ways of living. What I find comical is that that's how majority of people still live here. Like I'm on an Airbnb right now and I'm, on a decent sized property, but like I can go outside and pick lemons, oranges, pomegranates, olives, like that most people in Italy, it doesn't really matter if you're in the north, the south, the middle, there is some type of agriculture on your property. And if it's not on your property, there's a farm stand or an ortofrutta is what they call is within a kilometer of your house. So you have the ability to get things that came from somebody else's property. Like nothing, you're not finding produce in most stores that has come from far away. Like the don't get me wrong, I love myself avocado. I don't eat it often, but avocado, pineapple, I would say those are probably the top two that you're gonna and bananas. And you'll find that here in grocery stores or even ortofruttas that are obviously not local. They're not locally grown. But even the Italians, they look at me like I'm fucking weird that I'm even buying it because they're just like, why? Look, why? But I'm just like, I love Mexican food and you cannot get Mexican food here. So this is how I meet in the middle. Um, so the moral of the story is that give yourself a little bit of breathing room because yes, navigating nutrition and navigating food it has its stressors. It's definitely very difficult. And I know that, there's a lot of people talking about that America is turning a new leaf, and I really hope that it is. But, we need to get away from these big stores. We need to get away from, you know, going to these big grocery stores and buying things from these big companies because this is perpetuating the problem. We vote with our dollars. And if we can start either growing our own food or we can start to source from other people that are doing it, support them. If you're like, fuck that, I don't want to grow, I don't want to have a farm, I don't want to have a garden, I don't have time for that. It's not my passion. Like, that's kind of the way I feel. Like, I kill everything. I killed a succulent, but I'm happy to support someone who is doing that and give them more reason to keep it going and be able to stock my house with that. And so the ancestral living, like in reality, it's not really a trend. It's actually us going back to one, the way that it used to be, and two, actually how a lot of healthier cultures still live. When you get into the idea of the blue zones are talking about, areas of the world that people live really long and they live very healthy lives. There is a blue zone here in Italy, and, that's in Sardinia, but most of Italy still subscribes to the same ideas. People are very active. They walk, there's a lot of hills, they climb hills, and they eat food that is either grown on their property or grown on their neighbor's property. So uh, it's not rocket science, but it's the ease of defaulting back into the convenience lifestyle in the US. Because like I said earlier, if I could, I'd probably eat a burger once a week. I'd probably, eat like nachos and deep fried tacos. But I can't get it. I can't access it. So in the US, you can access shit food every hour of the day delivered to your door by Uber Eats. Like there is temptation, there is convenience. Like this is one of the reasons why obesity and chronic illness are such a problem. So it's really for us to try to overcome that, through, I don't want to say discipline, like somewhat of it is discipline, but it's through making a conscious effort to choose differently. So, with that, maybe all of you guys are going to move to Italy now after this. I promise you the food is fantastic, but overall my intention is to help you to understand why food is potentially consuming you from a mental and emotional perspective, why it feels so difficult to lose weight, why it feels so difficult to just eat well. It was designed that way. It was designed that way, and it takes a level of discipline, a level of choice, a level of perseverance in order to choose differently for you and your family. It's not easy, but it's worth it.